Hello, my name's Lauren, and if you've not seen my videos before, I like to talk about all things bookish, so book reviews, reading vlogs, book hauls, all of that good stuff. And today we have got the first book review for 2025. Unfortunately, it's not the best book review. It's just sort of middle of the road, but we shall get into it. It is for The Betrayal of Thomas True by AJ West. Now, I wanted to love this book, and I will start this review by saying that I believe I am firmly in the minority by not really enjoying this book, because the reviews for this online are fantastic. Like, it gets really, really good reviews, but it just did not do it for me. So I thought I would do a review sort of to balance out all the positives, because I cannot be the only person that found these problems with this book. So this year I am actually making notes on all the books that I read. So I have my notebook because it's just going to help with these reviews. So I have my notes ready to talk about everything in this book. Now, I am going to do this spoiler free. There's going to be a lot to talk about with it, but I won't reveal like any big plot points in it. So then if you do read it, it's not ruined the experience for you. So I first saw this book being reviewed on TikTok, and I was instantly drawn in by the premise of it. However, and I feel really bad saying this, like, this is not to bash the author at all, because there's just some things we don't get along with. Like, we all like different things when it comes to reading. However, I have read an AJ West book before. I have read his debut novel, which was The Spirit Engineer. I read it when it first came out, and that also wasn't my favourite. However, I decided to give The Betrayal of Thomas True a go, because my thinking was The Spirit Engineer was a debut novel. We all know debut novels can come with their own set of issues. Maybe things had changed. I think I will be drawing the line with AJ West novels after this. Like, I just don't think I can gel with the author's writing at all. So I think this is where my AJ West journey ends, because I can't put myself through it anymore. Like, both books sounded extremely promising, and both have been a bit of a letdown. So we'll get into it. The Betrayal of Thomas True. The premise of this book is fantastic. I will say it just drew me in instantly. So it is about 18th century molly houses. So it's a piece of history that's quite overlooked. So if you're not sure what a molly house is, there were places where gay men used to go in like the 17th, 18th, early 19th century, because obviously they couldn't just be out and about as a gay man. So they went to these secret underground locations where they could be who they wanted and do what they wanted, basically. So it is set around a molly house in London in the early 1700s. Now, first point, it is actually based on a very real molly house. This molly house existed. It was run by Mother Clap. That was the nickname of the woman that ran it. That is also the name of the woman in the book. So it is based on a real place and a real woman. However, that is not made very clear from the start of the book. I had to research that myself. So that was point number one. So the subject matter for me, it felt like it should have been given a more serious and informative story. Now, when you get to the author's note at the back of the book, that is really informative, really like well researched. And I should also point out that AJ West isn't a historical researcher, and you don't get that vibe when you're reading the book. I have since looked, and his website also contains lots and lots of information about Mother Clap, about molly houses, about early 18th century history in general. And I feel like the story needed more of that. Now, I'm well aware that it is a work of fiction, and therefore it's there for entertainment purposes. You don't want to be bogged down with loads of history, but it needed some, and it had none. So for me, the book should have been more in line with the author's note and what is on his website, and it just wasn't. There are a lot of characters in this book, and the vast majority of them for me just felt super distracting. The Mollys in the book use their male names and their female names, and they're interchanged quite regularly. There is a guide at the beginning of the book with the male and female names. However, I read this on a Kindle, and it is an absolute pain when there are things like that in a book to flick back and forth when you are a Kindle reader. So there are a lot of characters, there are a lot of names to remember. However, for me, most of those characters were just forgettable. They didn't really add anything to the story, and if anything, they just distracted me from the main part of the story and the one character that I actually really liked. So, credit where credit is due, Gabriel Griffin in this book is a really, really well written character, super well developed. You can really get on board with this story, and to be honest, he was one of the only characters that I connected with in this. For me in particular, the aunt and uncle and the justices in this story just feel really weird. They feel really out of place. They aren't particularly well written for me. They're not particularly well developed, and I was left feeling really confused, particularly about the aunt and uncle, because it seems like they're there for some sort of comedic value that doesn't hit the mark. And then, without spoilers, they actually have a more serious role towards the end of the novel, and it just feels really all over the place, which actually is the general tone for the novel, I found. Like, right from the first couple of pages, something felt off about the book that I just could not put my finger on, and usually that would be a massive red flag for me to DNF a book, and I was very, very close to DNFing it. However, because of how many glowing reviews it gets, I did carry on. I then got to 60% the way through the book, and at that point, I won't DNF a book if I'm over halfway through it, but I was so close to DNFing this at 60%, because it starts to bring in a magical realism element that just feels so like left field. It's unreal. It's a very bizarre storyline. Again, it really took away from what should have been a serious story, and I'm yet to figure out what it actually added to it. It was just bizarre. Like, it did not need to be there at all. It brought nothing to the story, and if anything, it like diluted it down. So again, at 60%, it very nearly got DNF'd. However, thankfully, that portion of magical realism was fairly short, so we could just get over it and get on with the book. Like I say, hands down, Gabriel Griffin, absolute redeeming feature of the book for me. At the end, like, the turn that his story takes is quite heartbreaking, and I will say that is really well done and quite well written. I did feel for Gabriel at the end, and I do wish that we'd have just stuck more to his storyline throughout the novel, rather than perhaps other characters being in it, like such as the aunt and uncle, the justices, that strange magical realism bit. That could have all have gone for me, just to focus on Gabriel. Another bit of the novel that I did like, but did come with a caveat, is that the premise of the book is that these men obviously are not supposed to be in these Molly houses, and there is a rat amongst them that is betraying them. That's why there's the justices. So someone is spilling all the secrets of these men that go to Mother Clapp's Molly house, and because of this, the justices are making their way to London in the hopes of hanging as many men as they can get their hands on, basically. And Gabriel's whole like arc in the story is trying to find out who the rat is. The revelation of the rat does not come until right at the very end of the novel, and I did like that I couldn't guess who the rat was. I'm not going to spoil it, I won't reveal who the rat is, but I did like that you couldn't guess, or at least I couldn't guess, who it was until it was actually revealed. There were a fair few twists and turns with like, could it be this person, and then it's disproved. So that was good. However, the caveat of that is the actual revelation of who the rat was super underwhelming and didn't particularly make sense for me, and it actually uncovered a few plot holes and perhaps a few historical inaccuracies when it was revealed who the rat was. Like, that is pretty much all I'm going to say on that point, because otherwise it will just give it away who it is. But it did not work for me at all, and I just didn't think the choice of who the rat was made much sense in context of the entire novel. So yeah, I ended up rating it 2.75 stars out of 5, and I think most of that was because of Gabriel. There was very little else in this book that made me give it such a high review. Part of me does wish I'd DNF'd it, just because it wasn't the most enjoyable reading experience in places, particularly the magical realism element, but I've read it now, it's done and dusted. And like I say, I am well aware that I am in the minority with this. It gets really good reviews online, so all I will say is make your own mind up about it. Pick it up. If you're enjoying it, great. If you're not enjoying it, DNF it. Because it's probably not worth struggling through to the end like I did. But yeah, like I say, my journey with AJ West books, I think, is done. I want to like them. The topics he chooses to write about are super interesting, but I just don't like how they're executed, so I think I'm done now with that. Do let me know if you have read this book, or if you plan on reading it. Let me know what your thoughts were on it, even if you completely disagreed with what I said, and I will see you next time.